All right, I've been wanting to make this video for a little bit, so let's just jump right into it. What am I talking about? I'm talking about bar chords in fourths tuning, okay? What is fourths tuning? Hopefully you already know that if you're at this video, but for fun, it's like standard tuning, but instead of E, A, D, G, B, E, you tune the high two strings up a half step, E, A, D, G, C, F. Why would you do this? It's because it removes the weird inconsistency of tuning fourth, 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 major, third, fourth, and it's just fourths all the way down, and or all the way up. I guess you can kind of think about it either way. There's some fun puns there, but you get the point. It's the big benefit is consistency, and I think that is sort of the real key. Why am I making this video? So there is a lack of good info and even a bunch of maybe like weird community misunderstandings about bar chords and fourths tuning. There seems to be this idea, so it kind of stems from this idea that when you switch from standard tuning to fourths tuning, you lose a bunch of chord knowledge. And sure, that is objectively true. I cannot argue that. For example, if you take the F major standard chord voicing from standard tuning and play it, yeah, it gets funky. So obviously that chord voicing doesn't work. I would argue that sort of, if you really wanted to think about it spiritually, so to speak, all harmony is valid, and so it's not a useless voicing, it's just a weird one. Technically, nothing makes that any less valid than something like an actual F major chord, right? Either way, it is different than in standard. Here's another super simple example. This isn't a bar chord, it's just a standard chord. If you take your typical fifth string major 7 voicing, so for C major 7 in standard tuning, that would look like 3, 5, 4, 5. But obviously that's a little bit off. I can slide that one back a little bit to compensate for the tuning, and I get 3, 5, 4, 4. So there's my new voicing, right? That doesn't make this one not useful, it's just different. So you don't lose chords or voicings by moving. You don't lose the physical voicings. They just are different informationally. But that's a pedantic point. The real point that I'm trying to make is even if you do lose your sort of typical 6-string bar chord voicings, does that really matter? I would argue no. Unless you have a very, very specific goal as a player of imitating existing voicings and sounding exactly, and I mean down to the timbre of the strings, sounding exactly like someone else's playing of that voicing, or if you're playing a cover song and you want that chord to sound exactly right. Is a listener really going to listen to somebody play an F major bar chord in standard versus me playing that and be able to tell the difference? I would argue no. But even more than that, I would argue bar chords really aren't necessarily super useful in terms of actually adding to a band dynamic. If you've got a keys player and a bass player and a singer and all this sort of information going on, does it really matter if you've got a couple of notes missing from your voicing? Can't I just play a sort of, lesser version of the chord if I really wanted to have the same sort of harmonic information? Maybe lose a couple of notes here and there, but you could also rearrange it. Maybe the low end isn't your priority, and so instead you could just play. And again, the power of fourths tuning is that I can use that shape literally everywhere. You can actually see in a lot of sort of rhetoric online that one of the benefits of bar chords is that you can use them everywhere. But of course, that's for a very specific and niche definition of the word everywhere. You can only use them everywhere, specifically on the 6th fret, or on the 6th string, right? That's where your root is. Or for fifth string bar chords, that's going to be on your 5th string, right? So you can't use them everywhere, But in force tuning, you can really use every voicing everywhere. So that's just another fun point. But even more importantly, I want to talk about what a bar chord is, because I think it's very quickly progressed from this idea that like my standard bar chord voicings aren't available to me. Which, granted, yes, they are not. I'd argue that doesn't matter literally at all, unless you have an extremely niche goal of reproducing down to the timbre specific voicings. I don't think that that's a useful goal for anybody. But if that's your goal, then that's your goal. I'm not arguing that. But it's quickly progressed from, hey, I lost my standard bar voicings, to bar chords don't seem to exist in the tuning. A good example of this is like, even if you look at really good force tuning players, and I'm going to pick on Alex Hutchings here, even though I love his playing and I think he's awesome. He has this video where he talks all about force tuning, and he goes over bar chord voicings, and they're these like monstrous, crazy 6-string, catastrophes, and I'm just like, what, dude? What are you doing? I mean, by the first time I watched him, I talk about this, I didn't know enough to question it. I was just like, oh yeah, bar chords are really weird in force tuning. And then the longer I've been playing force tuning, the more I realized not only is that a basically useless thing to show people, just because those voicings like aren't super practical or useful or like comfortable. But actually hidden within force tuning is like this whole world of bar chords that is infinitely more useful, in my opinion, my personal opinion, than in something like standard, because there's a bunch more, they're way simpler, they're low effort, they're very easy and comfortable to play, and you can literally, by the definition of the word everywhere, use them everywhere. You don't have to modify your definition to include a specific string set or any sort of like weird information. You can use them everywhere. Technically, if I have this voicing, I could even use it on the highest string. Of course, there's invisibly some strings down here that I'm not actually playing, but you could think of this note as this chord shape, just like missing some information on the top, but also pedantic. But you can really use that voicing everywhere. So, really quick, I'm going to switch views, and I want to talk about just what is a bar chord so that we can be on the same page. So, Wikipedia definition, I'm not trying to go super left field here. In music, a bar chord is a type of chord on guitar or other stringed instrument played by using one finger to press down multiple strings across a single fret of the fingerboard. One finger, multiple strings, not 6 strings. Very specifically, not all the strings, right? Just more than one string. So 2 strings, got yourself a bar chord, right? So that is, I think, an important point just to begin with. So let's go through what I view as some immediately useful, low effort, very practical voicings, and then I'm going to get sort of off into the weeds on some of this. Couple of notes. Sorry for the image quality. I wish that I was like a professional video editor and could have sort of like crazy stuff and diagrams going along with this. Maybe one day, but not today. What I do have is this handy little app that I've made, which of course defaults to force tuning. It's also, you can change it to other tunings. You should check it out. I will link it in the description. But super useful for force players because it has all the chords and you can use it for force tuning. There's some other alternative fretboard stuff out there which does not accommodate for force tuning. This not only accommodates it but defaults to it. So that's fun. Anyways, I'm going to poke around really quick for a particular... Actually, you know what? Doesn't matter. Sort of ignore what key we're playing in here. It's not really an E major. I just need you to see a fretboard to have like a visualization of what I'm doing here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to play a very simple 2-finger, 3-note voicing. And this is going to be a major 6 voicing. Now I'm going to play it here. So this is going to be C, major 6. So it's going to be C, E, A. So 5, 4, 4. In again, this is in force tuning. So E, A, D, G, C, F, right? So 5, 4, 4. Major 6 bar chord. So this is a C, a major third, the E, and then a major sixth, the A. So we've got super little simple bar chord voicing. Taking that a step further, and this gets into sort of another territory of music theory, which is really fun. It's sort of a tangential to this video, but I'll just mention it, which is that chords can be viewed as chords sort of stacked on top of each other. You can kind of view a lot of chords as just being inversions or substitutions of one another, and this, I think, really kind of highlights that. So we're going to take our simple 5/4/4 voicing, and we're going to take this first finger, and instead of just barring these 2 high frets, we're going to bar 4 strings now instead of 2. But we're going to keep that our second finger on the 5. So we get 4/5/4/4, which is us extending this fret, this shape. So we've got C, E, A. We're adding this tritone, this F sharp beneath that. So we get a minor 7 flat 5 voicing. And if we run through that, we've got our root F sharp, a minor 5, a flat 5 with the C, a minor 7 with the E, and a minor third with the A. So we have a minor 7 flat 5 voicing. So 2 things immediately. One, we get 2 voicings, a major 6 and a minor 7 flat 5 with 2 fingers, very easy to play, and really valid voicings. And more importantly, I think, for the long term of sort of your music theory knowledge and growth, this shows that a minor 7 flat 5 chord is really just a major 6 with a tritone in the bass, which is a whole nother thing. And we're going to continue that pattern. We're going to go another step down. So we're going to add the 5th fret on the A string, which is going to be this D. So now our shape is going to be, we're barring these 4 frets, which, by the way, that's a valid chord too, just barring those 4 frets. Also a valid chord. This is a quartal chord. I'll get into that in a minute with another example, but still a valid chord. So we're going to put our 5th, our 2nd and 3rd fingers are going to be playing the 5th fret. So we're going to end up at, from the A string up, we got 5, 4, 5, 4, 4. And again, this is with a bar and then 2 extra fingers, right? This is taking our same shape and we're just extending it down in the register. So we start with this major 6 voicing. We go down just one, we extend our bar from 2 to 4 strings. Same voicing. Now we've got a minor 7 flat 5. Now we add yet another note in the bass and we have a dominant 13 chord. So now you know that a dominant 13 is really just a minor 7 flat 5 with a major 3rd, a major 6th in the bass, right? Or you could think of a dominant, going up, you could think of a dominant 13 chord as a dominant chord with or just a root with a minor 7 flat 5 chord beneath it, so on and so forth. But you get the idea. Just in this one little spot, we've got right? Super easy, super nice to play. On top of that, again, just barring. We get a little quartal chord, for example, D, G, C, F on the 12th fret, or all 4 open on the high 4 strings. Super easy to play. And this is actually a super valid chord. Again, I want to make it clear that I think all chords are valid, right? You could play any combination of notes whatsoever. That's valid harmony. So slap a fucking finger down. Might not be the best chord, might not be the most usable chord, but it is inarguably a chord, right? So anyways, again, one of the superpowers of this tuning is that every one of these little voicings you learn works literally everywhere, right? So anyways, that reminds me, there's like this sort of little Frank Vignola type minor 6 sort of run thing, like maybe familiar to some people. Going a step back and showing how many other sort of easy voicings you can get out of this simple bar shape that we've got. And you've got, you start with this little simple major 6 voicing. Let's take that whole thing and we're just going to move it down a fret. So now we're barring 3 strings, same shape though. Now it's a major 6/9 voicing because we've added a 9 in the upper register. Right? So just from this one little simple 2-finger thing, we've got major 6, minor 7 flat 5, add a 3rd finger and we get a dominant chord. We can move everything up. We get a major 6/9 chord. We can remove the 2nd finger, just go to this simple bar. We've got a chordal chord. Is this a valid chord? Absolutely. Here's 2 examples. So What by Miles Davis off Kind of Blue. Now technically, these aren't actually, I think, in the original voicings, but it would be these sort of on the D, G, and C strings. Right, you get the idea. Moving on to another example, and really sort of highlighting the shapes I've been showing you and why I showed you to them in the specific spot. Here's a Joe Pass tune. It's off his album Intercontinental. It's like the first 12 seconds of the album on a song called Chloe. Starts. That's an F major triad inversion into a G minor 9 voicing. I'm just gonna play it and then I'll talk about it. Exactly as he plays it. I at least I think to my ear pretty identically to the album. You've got a F major triad inversion into a G minor 9, which again I'm using a bar chord here. These magical mystical bar chords that don't exist in fourth tuning. Well, here's another one, right? I've got 5 7 5 5. It's a G minor 9 voicing on the top 4 strings. Here's another sort of moving into more music theory territory. We've got back to the minor 7 flat 5 on the 3rd fret. So this is going to be a F minor 7 flat 5 chord, but with an A in the melody. So then he moves that exact same shape back chromatically a half step. Another minor 7 flat 5 chord, this time an E minor 7 flat 5 chord. Again, our same basic shape, the second shape that I showed you. He keeps the A in the melody, so he moves this pinky up to do the melody. And then he pulls that pinky off to just play the vanilla E7 flat, E minor 7 flat 5 voicing. So again, bar chord, bar chord, bar chord, bar chord. And then he repeats the same thing up here. And then he ends with a quartal chord, quartal, built-in fourths, D, G, C, F. It's just a D quartal. And we can sort of, there's a couple of just general music theory principles we can talk about just from that example. One is a mindset thing, which is that Joe Pass is showing us that these chords are valid, right? Not that we needed him to, but he's sort of a master of the chord melody sort of thing and the jazz harmony. Interestingly, he's using minor 7 flat 5 chords a half step apart. Minor 7 flat 5 chords typically thought to be dark, right? Sort of mysterious chords. They're a half diminished chord. They've got this sort of diminished quality, but he sort of uses them differently. Now, whether that's because he's thinking about them functionally as dominant chords potentially, or he's just using them non-functionally to express himself in some way, or if it's because really they are, as I showed earlier, they're just sort of a dominant chord with the root missing, right? The F minor 7 flat 5 we could think of as a D 13. The E minor 7 flat 5 we could think of as a C sharp 13 or a D flat 13. So maybe functionally it's really something like so that was switching between some real simple, dominant voicings and then the and then the minor 7 flat 5 voicing that I showed earlier. So there's all sorts of bar chords available in force tuning. They have more power by an order of magnitude, I think personally, due to their flexibility and simplicity, the amount of them that you can find, the fact that you can literally use them everywhere across the fretboard. I think force tuning doesn't. I don't think that it's valid to say. You could argue that by switching to force tuning, you lose some stuff from standard. I don't think that that's actually that big of a deal. I don't think it matters literally at all, actually. And I think that you gain so much more than what you would have in standard tuning, in my mind. Especially flexibility and consistency across the fretboard. That's really the magic sauce. But you get all sorts of other stuff. Also, because it's tuned in force, you get all sorts of really interesting. You get to take advantage of that and explore the whole quartal chord territory, this whole like force, because you've got, typically when you bar, you just got stacked fourths, which is what quartal chords are. So you get all sorts of stuff for free based on that. Simple example, 5 bar 3 strings, and I just put a pinky above that. So in this case, I'm playing on the high 4 strings, 8 5 5 5, and this would be an A sharp sus2 chord. This is an A sharp sus2, and you can actually also put your middle finger in the bass to play the A sharp again, and you get a more full-bodied A sharp sus2. Sus2 chords are actually inversions of sus4 chords as well, so this is something else, sus4, on top of that. And you'll also hear, the more you play quartal chords, I hate that word because I always get sort of choked up on it, but the more you play quartal chords, and mess with them, you start to hear the similarities between sus chords, because sus chords are just quartal chords, they're just stacked in force. Or, if you think of a sus2, it's really just an inversion, right? And they have a similar sort of floating quality, and if you look back at sort of Kind of Blue, So What off the Miles Davis record, Kind of Blue, the reason those chords also appear there is because due to this sort of like floating, almost non-functional quality to them, they lent themselves very well to the modal jazz movement. So you get so lots of ideas here. Hopefully you take something away from this, which is that there's lots of bar chords. We could look at looking at some. So this is an E major scale here. So we've got this 6 fret thing going on. You can see there are whole frets where we've got valid interval stacks. So the 4th fret, again, not super useful. Almost has that same kind of floating, non-functional feel as a sus chord. Also with the chaos of holy shit, 700 notes or whatever. But you could take a part of that, and it's valid. And if you sort of revoice it slightly, you've got 3 sus chords right there, sort of stacked on top of each other. Taking that a step further, if we look at sort of this 6-6-6-7 thing going on here, or reverse 7-6-6-6, we've got the minor 6-9 voicing, which this, because I'm sort of taking that 9 in and out as the root, you can actually hear that a minor 6-9 and a sus4, or I'm sorry, a sus2 with multiple roots is actually they're inversions of each other. So again, kind of all these chords kind of do the same thing. You can really, like, you could think about a minor 7-flat-5 chord as a dominant chord. I'm pretty sure that's how Joe Pass was using it in Chloe. Maybe even if he wasn't thinking about it that way. But that leads to another point, which is that chords that you think of having a typical quality, you can superimpose new qualities, or you can abandon the idea of that chord quality by just using it chromatically, or using it in sort of like the constant form, sort of linear, just like take the same shape and move it around idea. Bill Frisell does this. Joe Pass does this. Tosin Abasi, even in sort of the super modern guitar players sort of movement, he talks about the same thing. He just takes shapes and ideas and melodies and whatnot and moves them around in what he calls constant form, which is where I get the phrase from it all. And Joe Pass is doing that, right in that example. He took a simple, I don't know if he took a melody and then put these chords under it, but he takes these simple chords and is just moving them around and reusing the shapes. And throughout the song, you actually see that if you start to break it down further. So what are the big takeaways? Lots of voicings, lots of bar chords, usable literally everywhere. There's infinite access to these chordal chords. They become very near to us, very easy to play, very available. Again, we've got sort of this minor 6-9 voicing. And if we go the other direction, instead of 7-6-6-6, we go 7-8-8-8. We've actually got a major 7-sharp-5 voicing. Again, 2 fingers, super easy to play. If we take our sus voicing from before, so in this case 8-5-5-5, we can actually, instead of barring 3 and playing the sus there, we can actually bar 4 and play the root with the middle finger as we did before. Still a 2-finger voicing, still a bar chord, still valid, still useful. And because you've got access to all these chordal chords and all these simple voicings that are very easy to move around, you can really experiment with this idea of sort of non-functional harmony, modal jazz, constant form, whatever you want to call it. It's sort of all different sides of the same dice. I don't know, but you get the point. Super easy, super fun to do. This whole sort of mini bar approach to voicings is kind of like how I'm approaching the guitar these days. Maybe too much. I'm sort of depending on this a lot when I pick it up and play. So that again is another chordal voicing. It's actually the minor 7 sharp 5 that we talked about earlier, just sort of extended. So don't believe the whole bar chords don't exist in fourth tuning. Maybe that's not really as common as I have been thinking it is. Obviously, I look at fourth tuning stuff more than sort of the average person. But that's really all I have to say for now. This has been sort of top of mind for a long time. I know this was kind of a ranty, long-winded video. Hopefully, this gives you an idea. If you're using fourth tuning, pull up this chart. Start looking at this like it's fourth tuning or fourth chords or chordal chords, and look for bar chords, look for shapes, look for stuff. I can see tons right now just looking at it that I've sort of mined out over the last couple of months and whatnot. So look into that. Also, I'm starting a fourth tuning Discord. I haven't found a lot of the other music discords to be super useful in terms of like actually finding and talking to people that are thinking about things in the same way, and having like legitimate discussions in meaningful ways. So I'm starting my own to see if maybe I can kind of upend that and at least create a kind of functional force tuning Discord that kind of all care about this idea and sort of figuring out force tuning and pushing it as far as we can and dispelling the myths, figuring out the ideology of how we approach the fretboard and things like that. Maybe expanding this tool set to include some other stuff. It's got some neat stuff. If you like Holdsworth, it's got a little Holdsworth scale generator that I threw in there. It's got arpeggios stuff. You can actually put multiple scales up and kind of look at stuff. It's actually not super useful, that view, but that's a conversation for another time. Anyways, that was it. I'll put the link to this fretboard app and the Discord that I put together in the description. The Discord is nothing right now. As of right now, it's just me. No roles, no moderators, no rules section. No nothing crazy. It's just a Discord. It's meant to like kickstart some conversation. I'm hoping a couple of folks that know more than me about force tuning will show up and see the video and maybe come tell me I'm an idiot in the Discord or something. So check out the description, and hopefully this helps you sort of down the path of unlocking some of the bar chords in force tuning. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Peace.